All right. Matthew chapter 27, verse 45. Now from the 6th hour there was darkness over all the land until the 9th hour. And about the 9th hour Jesus cried out with a loud voice, saying, Eli, Eli, lama sabachthani. I can never say that. That is, my God, why have you forsaken me? And some of the bystanders, hearing it, said, this man is calling Elijah. And one of them at once ran and took a sponge, filled it with sour wine, and put it on a reed and gave it to him to drink. But the other said, wait, let us see whether Elijah will come to save him. And Jesus cried out again, and with a loud voice, and yielded up his spirit. And behold, the curtain of the temple was torn in two, from top to bottom, and the earth shook, and the rocks were split. The tombs also were opened, and many bodies of the saints who had fallen asleep were raised, and coming out of the tombs after his resurrection, they went into the holy city and appeared to many. When the centurion and those who were with him, keeping watch over Jesus, saw the earthquake and what took place, they were filled with awe and said, truly, this was the Son of God. There were also many women there looking on from a distance who had followed Jesus from Galilee, ministering to him, among whom were Mary Magdalene, and Mary the mother of James and Joseph, and the mother of the sons of Zebedee. Okay, we're going to stop right there. Okay, so again, we started off with verse 45, talking about the death of Jesus, to that paragraph, and then we get into 51, which is what we wanted to talk about a little bit more. And behold, the curtain of the temple was torn in two, from top to bottom, and it's 52 is really where we wanted to talk about, right? The tombs were also opened, and many bodies of the saints who had fallen asleep were raised, and coming out of the tombs after his resurrection, they went into the holy city and appeared to many.
Go ahead and explain that.
All I can say is zombies, guys. So I did do some research, and I even went to a high authority. I tapped on Dr. Adam Hughes' shoulders and said, you'll have to explain this to me or you're fired. You know, because I'm in desperate need of this. And so I did do some commentary search and stuff like that. Well, first of all, another point is none of the other Gospels have these scripture reference in here at all. None of them have that. So I can't do an alternate look and give different perspective and that kind of stuff. The commentators, on some of them, like on mine in my unit here, just say it and they move on. Mm-hmm. They don't say a word about this at all. Other commentators talk about talk about possible reasons why it's not stated in other Gospels. Things like Matthew, just as he was writing this, just got caught up into what was going on and while he was writing this, and just remarked something that had happened later. It didn't happen in this sequence. And the reason for that, if you see the word, the operative word for me, it finally said, was in 53, and coming out of the tombs after his resurrection, they went into the holy city. So when was his resurrection, right? Yeah. It was after, I think like almost 50 days or something like that. He had his resurrection and then his ascension, right? So, it is what I'm talking about there. So some of the commentators talk about that he just kind of put this footnote in. By the way, the resurrection is so real, even the dead in Christ were real. And they talk about who the saints were. Some were saying that it was maybe some of the notable Old Testament people, Elijah and others like that were raised.
I guess even if it was talking about Jesus' resurrection and not the ascension, then it's already out of sequence.
Right.
You know, because we're talking about his death.
That's correct.
So
right.
I don't know, there is something there.
That it just seems out of place.
Something I read talked about first fruits. Jesus was the first fruit.
Right.
And that's why it was after his resurrection for the others to come forward, not before he came forward.
That's correct.
But they would be part of the first fruits. And then we follow the main fruit that's coming later. That was one thing I had read as an explanation.
Right.
And then one of the things I read commentaries, like you said, just said, it doesn't say if they died again or if they went up with the Lord when he went up.
Right.
But that was basically,
Right.
that's all it said was, and then it, like you said, moved on. Like,
Right, it's like,
Yeah.
okay, so they got reanimated bodies, I'm presuming, the way they describe it is, you know, their flesh came back, everything came back to them. So, and they went into the city where people saw
and
them,
people saw him. Yeah.
and then what?
Yeah.
It's like the TV show they built up for a sequel and didn't happen, they didn't make the sequel. It just, nothing occurs to us, just dead silence.
I got a reference to Daniel's vision of the four beasts.
Yep,
And in there, excuse me, it says, until the ancient of days came, and judgment was given for the saints of the Most High, and the time came when the saints possessed the kingdom. So almost like that was their judgment was given to them. They were waiting for, maybe they're waiting for Jesus to die for their sins beforehand too, or something. I don't know.
I don't know.
And they finally were allowed to go to heaven, given the possess the kingdom.
So, because we can't analyze, well, we can't come to a conclusion. We can't say, here's all the answers to it. Does that make the entire Word of God invalid? Do you know what I'm saying? There are some people that will position that if you don't get 100% of the questions answered, then it's not valid.
Maybe you just haven't understood it yet.
Yeah.
Well, that's kind of where my position is it is all black and white. It's not gray area. It's the fact that we just don't know.
Right.
We don't have enough
You talk about
knowledge.
the mystery of the
It's
faith.
something that happened, but we don't know all the details
Right.
about it.
Yeah,
Right.
But it-
yeah.
Right.
But it to be mentioned, it means like, well, it happened, you know.
Well, maybe, I'm not sure if I'm trying to think back on why I think this way. But I've read this 100 times, and it is right after he says, in his body lifted up his soul, or however it was. And then they talk about, it's when he said the resurrection, I guess my mind just went, well, his soul just went up. As opposed to what you just said at the very beginning, that, you know, he was resurrected after 3 days and then 50, whatever it was, days,
Before ascension.
ascension.
Yeah.
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 So, I think you're probably right. He didn't write this literally the minute.
Right.
This isn't a blow-by-blow commentary. So he may have said, oh, by the way, before I forget, type thing, because he's so caught up, as you're saying. I don't know.
But wouldn't you think it was such a momentous event, people that had died and now are back alive again, that other writers would have recorded? In Acts, maybe? Would have recorded in Acts, or, you know, someone would have taken note. Even the other historical writers that are not scriptural writers, like Josephus and other historians, they make no mention of it. I don't know. I honestly just, I don't know. So there's my answer, guys. I don't know.
So what did Adam say?
The same thing. It is, I can go with either way. He said he leans towards that the saints were like Elijah and other holy people. I don't know. I forgot the word with.
It doesn't say all the saints, I just said some.
Yeah.
So it makes you wonder.
Right. Yeah. But he says he could clearly not put any foundation on it, and that's honestly, he says that's why preachers don't preach it. They just kind of skim over it. You got nothing really to work with, I think, with this. So, but you're still left with that question: do you invalidate everything just because you can't explain everything? You know, I think not. But no, that's just my opinion.
I mean, just as much as you can invalidate that the sun stood still
Right.
during, what was Elijah? You know, I mean, in order for the sun to stand still, the earth has to stop turning.
Right. Yeah.
So how do you explain, you can't explain that.
Oh, I gave you the meteor excuse last time, right? That's what
But, I mean, just because you can't explain it, you know,
It didn't happen.
it doesn't mean it didn't happen.
That's right.
And
Yeah.
and
That's
rock
where faith
split,
comes in.
Rock split, right.
God said it, I believe it.
and the veil, that may be something we could talk about.
Well,
The curtain splitting, in verse 51,
Yeah,
that may be something we have more, get more traction on.
right. There are references of the veil being torn.
talking
But it's in
about.
respect to the access to God more than,
Yeah,
more than a cloth being torn. It was about now the Holy of Holies, which is what the veil
right.
was now open. And in some commentators talk about makes it available. That the Holy of Holies is now available to everybody.
So that corresponds with the following verses on that. I never thought about you said that, because remember, Hades was the holding place. Remember Christ, people say Christ went down to hell. No, he went to Hades, which remember, heaven had not been opened up yet because the resurrection opened up heaven, access. So now, the veil being torn, I love it. Access is open to everyone to God through that resurrection. Now you get the Old Testament saints who were in Hades waiting for this moment. So I would say it's more or less, that's the evidence that, hey, some people
Yes.
were let out to prove that, because now we have access to heaven. I'm no longer sitting in Hades.
Right.
The access is given to us now. And I'm with you, Howard, as far as, all 10 of us could go watch a movie, and you know what, especially with our wives, what we write about, totally different what they're going to write about. And so that's how I correspond with things like this. I'm just like, well, for whatever the reason is, you have to go and report. No, it's right there. Don't know why. But it'd be the same thing when we watch a movie. But I think Hades, when he went down, that's what he was doing. He was opening up access to heaven because Christ was resurrected days later.
Think about what he preached. What did he preach to the people in Hades? The same thing that he preached to the people on
Yep.
earth, right?
Yep, exactly.
It was the whole idea of the veil being torn in two.
Yep.
That was the preaching. Everything was, his preaching was things are changing. There's a change coming, right? And they didn't accept that change. And that's the same exact thing when he went to Hades. He preached that same thing, that now you have access to God because of the sacrifice. Before it was, I'm going to sacrifice, you're going to have access. Now it's been done, you've got access to God. That veil is no longer there anymore.
And right, when did that happen? The resurrection.
Yep.
All right, so when I was reading this, a question came to my mind. So after a couple of days, someone obviously noted that the curtain was torn. Did they ever sew it back up?
I guarantee you they did.
Yeah.
Yeah, they had to.
Yeah.
To continue the religious practices of the
So
law.
how did they, if it was torn, therefore it was defiled, how did they go about,
One thing that's
Make
kind
it-
of a little more of a practical,
yeah,
practical, but literal. Priests were allowed to go, certain priests, I'm not sure the right level, were allowed to go in that area where you can see the curtain.
once a year?
Well-
I'm talking about not behind the curtain, I'm talking
Right.
about to see the front of the curtain.
Yeah.
I don't know, I'm sure that wasn't everybody allowed to do that, there was only certain priests. But the chief priest was the one that could go in once a year behind the curtain. So, that's saying that there is no, pardon the expression, pope that's running everything, is open to other people. And so that's the symbolism, but I'm wondering if it was not the chief priest, because remember when they were traveling the ark, when it was the donkey or whatever stumbled, or the guy just put his hand on it,
Just steady it.
boom, he's dead.
Mhm.
Their practices were only the chief priest once a year could see behind the curtain. So if it's ripped, someone had to go see what's behind the curtain.
Yeah.
Did they just turn to dust or
Yeah.
not?
Did, is
but-
God's presence no longer there?
Well, okay, yeah, true, but from their standpoint, I'm thinking of the guy on the ground.
Yeah.
Not on the ground, but physically there. All of a sudden, he can see in. I've always wondered how they set it up. Somebody had to bring it in and hang the curtain, but that's where the worker side of me thinks, all right, he physically did that.
When Moses first.
I know the chief priest didn't go up and hang the robe and do it and make sure.
It's very practical questions.
Yeah, but exactly, that's where my mind
Yeah.
goes. But when they saw it, someone had to go, ooh, and you say, certainly they showed it up. Do you think the chief priest would have been the only one allowed in there with the needle and thread?
Right.
Or would he have taken it down and told,
Well, that may be the answer, what I would just ask. At that moment from the resurrection on, was that where his presence was?
I think that's the.
Right? And no longer,
So
and
they-
Even after they
They
sewed
didn't
it up,
say-
if you went in there, maybe you would not have died like it was before.
Exactly, that's kind of what I'm thinking.
You know?
But when you said certainly they did, I guarantee you did, I think it's the way you worded
Yeah.
it. I'm thinking, oh no, we've lost our magic, the
Yeah.
chief priests.
Yeah.
And so they're gonna wanna go sew it up because that's
Yeah.
where their power,
Well,
that's
sure.
their power base.
Right.
And they're gonna wanna go, don't tell anybody. George, come over here. Let's sew this up. You know, it's okay. Everything's fine, guys. You know, still give me your alms and give me your extra cows and all that sort of
We
stuff.
just installed the zipper, made it convenient for everyone.
Yes. So that's the physical things that I start thinking about is the way tactical.
Right.
I wonder how close this was to 70 when the temple was destroyed. That way they couldn't use it anymore. Did they?
40 years?
40 years.
40 years
40
from
years?
there.
About 40 years.
But they know that if you look at historical writings, it was, I want to say it was like 12 to 14 inches thick. When we talk about this veil, it was very thick. It was repaired.
Yeah,
It
good.
happened. I'm thinking, and
So
again,
the
what I
40s
remember
thick,
wearing.
Is it like a multi-layer?
Oh yeah, it was.
It says, I was reading it just a minute ago, it says 72 twisted plates,
Yeah.
plats of 24 threads,
Yeah.
60 feet high, 30 feet wide.
It was.
I'm
massive.
just-
Somebody
60
stated one
feet.
time how many mules
How
it
many
would take to
stories
tear
is
it. I heard a
60 feet?
preacher one time preach
Wide.
that.
Not tall.
It was
Oh, wide.
It was strong. It was strong.
High,
Golly.
30 feet wide.
Yeah.
Oh, 60 feet high? Storage 10 feet.
It's 10 feet, right?
Yeah.
That's
Yeah,
a 6-story building.
Yep. It's unbelievable.
And it had to be maintained, and things will, how many hundreds of years has it been?
Yeah.
But the key is, like
Oh
I
my
said,
gosh.
back to, you're right, the temple was, the veil was torn, and now all people that is have access to God through Christ, where before it was just that high priest runs. Yeah, I think that's
Wow.
the main thing about this story.
It was top to bottom. I mean, that's
That's
not just a
nothing
little
man
tear.
didn't do it, God did it. That's the
Right.
example.
Yeah.
And it's so,
And if-
think about that, Aaron.
It's just not access to God, it's access to forgiveness. I mean, because that's what went on behind,
Well-
that's what went on behind the curtain.
Right.
You're right, but you gotta remember now, here's the key with forgiveness. In the Old Testament, even now, Christ was our propitiation.
Yes,
Okay, that means something had to satisfy the sin debt.
Yes.
I mean, it's like someone saying, well, please forgive me, Father. Well, no, something has to pay a price for your sin. So that's purpose. So I can go to God all I want and ask for forgiveness. I'm not going to get it because the sin has to be what God says. That's what I need for your
Yeah.
atonement.
Right.
See, that's what so many people get confused with forgiveness. Once a year was not for forgiveness. They knew they were going to sin. It was the atonement for their sin.
Yeah.
And that's the
Amen.
point. We missed this side of the cross. That was so important. And not necessarily forgiveness, it was atonement for our sin. It makes it even deeper. And when you think about it, a lot of people miss that. Appropriation is a key word there. And it's like, you know, if someone comes in and wants to rip up everything, you hear, oh, I'm sorry, y'all. Well, no, that's not good enough. You got to put it all back together, then I'll let you do it. Well, that's what God said. No, that's not good enough. You got to have faith in my son's death, because that's what's going to make up for your sin. That's the atonement. And it's really, I try to get that point around to even especially my kids that I teach, because that's how bad sin is. It's just not forgiveness, it's atonement.
right.
God stepped in and atoned for our sin. So that's what this represents. It's
Right.
beautiful when you think about it.
Do you think that the priest told anybody that the curtain was ripped?
I was wondering about that too.
I don't think so.
Did that go out on Jerusalem News or not?
I think they went and sewed it back up, or tried to repair it, because that was their power base. Whether they thought of it literally or
Well, how did
figuratively.
Matthew know? So,
I'm not sure, he got out because
got
someone
out,
had it.
because Matthew knew about it.
Yeah.
Especially if it's whatever the dimensions he was rattling off.
And it's an earthquake too, so I mean, but, and you can blame it on the earthquake. People say, oh, it's an earthquake. And people say, okay, don't worry. That's right.
Did you, I don't know if you caught, speaking of that earthquake, when the centurion, it talks about 54, when the centurion and those who were with him keeping watch over Jesus, what did they do about the earthquake? They didn't feel the earthquake. Mine says they saw the earthquake. Okay. You know, we get to see earthquakes, right, on video cameras when the stores are shaking and we get to see all of that kind of stuff. This, they actually saw the earth moving and quaking.
Never thought about that. It's pretty cool.
Yeah.
It's like it's the tornadoes we saw this week. You see the tornadoes, like, whoa, you can hear about all you want, but when you see it on, like, oh my goodness
Right.
gracious.
Yeah, I was asking Frank if he'd actually ever seen, we were talking about this earlier, actually it's been in a tornado. Have you actually ever seen it? I've never seen one other than, on TV kind of thing. I can't imagine how scary and awe-inspiring. And here to see the earthquake. So the centurion did what? What did Matthew record that he had said?
Surely this was the Son of God.
Why is that significant? I mean, okay, so he acknowledged him. Yeah, it was the Son of God. What's the big deal?
Well, I think what they're saying that, I mean, the only thing they didn't say is the chief priest said
Yeah,
he's the Son of God.
yeah.
But a centurion was a pagan,
Gentile.
A Gentile, more specifically.
Gentile,
more
and-
specifically.
he didn't believe, or he was told to go do his stuff. And if anything, he was said, this is an evil guy, just, beat him up, whatever, do what you need to do, kill him. And so he's trash. And all of a sudden he goes, oh, now I see. So to me, it's like, even the centurion, not so much that the centurion. It was more like, it was so obvious, and the guys that were right there on the ground, who should have no reason to believe him.
It's an
I
oddity
think
because.
He saw so many other deaths too.
Well,
That's
yeah,
He saw how so many other men died.
That's true too.
And here Jesus stopped dying, and he's different than everybody else because he's not fighting back. He's not accusing those what they're doing to
Right,
him.
he died earlier.
And he heard him
Right.
say, Father, to thy hands I commend my spirit. It says he was standing right under the cross. He probably heard that. And then seeing everything that's taken place, he came to that conclusion. That's how I see it anyway.
Who didn't say, surely this was the Son of God?
Like he just said,
chief priest.
The chief priests, the ones who should have known, studied scriptures, saw all the signs, right? Should have been the ones responsible for this, not.
and they want to pay the soldiers a lie. They tell them this is what
Yeah.
happened.
I guess
I mean, it's what Jesus said about Israel too, is that, it says you guys are looking for a sign. You always want a physical sign. You've got evidence and you've got everything written about me, when I was coming, how I was coming, and everything else.
Right.
And yet you want a sign.
Yeah.
And then he said the only sign you've been given is a sign of Jonah, right?
Right.
So, with the centurion, to me, one of the important things is this centurion was gave evidence that all of these things happened, right? It's only because the things happened that he said this was the Son of God. So he was saying these things, the earthquake and everything else that happened, were truthful. That's what made him believe. So.
And if you recall that the Gentiles, they believed in many, many, many other gods.
Right.
Many others. I mean, we're talking
They're very religious.
pluralism, right? Very religious with them. To identify this in singularity is amazing to me. Just absolutely amazing
Yep.
to me. Okay, moving off that paragraph. 24. Okay. Verse 55. There were also many women there. So what? Oh, did I say that out loud? I said that one. So they were witnesses from a distance, right? Ministering to him. What do they mean by that ministering to him? What does that mean?
Mine has a little note that just says waiting on.
Waiting on?
Yeah.
So waiting as in serving or waiting on him to die?
It just says waiting
Care
on.
of them, maybe.
Taking care of?
Well, but when you think of, there's notations here and there about, they try to do it on Jesus, giving him sour wine, which was like a painkiller, giving this other, I don't remember the chemical, whatever they called it before, about another way of trying to give him something to drink.
Gall.
Gall, that's it. And I'm wondering if that's part of the service, because there's probably certain things they were allowed to do for the prisoners that are being executed. But there's certain things they couldn't do. They obviously couldn't take him down, as far as the Roman laws were concerned. It may have been bathing their feet, that's all they could reach, who knows?
Right.
But there was something that was done, and maybe they were doing that, whatever that was.
Read what yours says, Howard, again, about that sentence.
Yeah, let me back up. I was looking at
I think it could be one of
John.
those sequential things.
sequential things. There were also many women there looking on from a distance who had followed Jesus from Galilee, ministering to him, among whom were, and then a list of people.
Right, so I'm wondering if the women were ministering to him while he was in Galilee, rather than the fact that they were ministering to him at this point, because it says that they were viewing from a distance.
Well, if you look at John 19, it talks about
That's where I was at.
these folks. It's showing Jesus, his mother's sister, Mary, the wife of Clopas, and Mary Magdalene are among those many women.
Yeah.
So they've been there from the beginning.
Right, so I think that's probably what it is. It was, these were women that were traveling, and they had been ministering to him. Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense. Mine says, and many women who had come from Galilee with Jesus to care for him
Yeah.
were watching from a distance.
Right.
Probably, if they had
Also,
a comma, it would
right.
separate.
Aren't we also within Passover
Yep.
Yeah.
here? So
Oh, yeah.
there's some
Yeah.
things you're not
With the
allowed to
oil
go
and
and do.
rub-
And,
rub it
Well,
Right.
there's
with the hair and
when
all.
they took them down, or they gave them back, someone had to physically take him
right, do
somewhere
the
to wrap him.
wrap, all that stuff.
Nicodemus
Right.
and Joseph, they were.
I think they got him in the tomb as quickly as possible. That's why they wanted to come back later to do the proper
That's right, 'cause
Right.
seasoning. if
Yeah,
I
they
can
only
call
had
it that,
three,
right?
well, they had 3 hours basically, because
Right.
they had from the third hour,
Right,
or
For
from
3
from-
o'clock.
From 3 o'clock to 6
6,
o'clock.
right,
Right.
right.
To get him down
Yeah.
and there's no hearse to carry him quickly to the cave.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
so-
You're not gonna get an Uber at that time of day, that's for sure. Yeah.
But I read that Nicodemus, the one that went to get his body, you know, to ask for it, that they wrapped him, and I read where they used 100 pounds of things between each wrapping, and all was 100 pounds. But it wasn't complete evidently for the women to come and do what they wanted to
They
do.
do the final touches.
So,
All right, so we get down to the end of this. And I got to ask the question, so what? Why is what Matthew just recorded up to this point such a big deal that it was worthy of recording? By the way, recorded in all the other Gospels. Why is it important? Why would God leave us this words? How does it apply?
Well, I think this is you gotta get it on the record because of what I'm gonna tell you here, not saying in 3 days, but what happens later. So I think that they wanna make sure that they show that he was dead, and this is what happened to him. And he didn't just get lost or stolen or whatever. The whole sequence of events, so when the resurrection did happen, this is how you got here. This is not an accident.
Okay,
That's what I see it.
great point.
And fulfilling prophecy.
Fulfilling prophecy. It's very important.
What stands out to me is that, I mean, all the things that happened when he was crucified certainly didn't happen to anybody else that was crucified.
Right, he didn't.
So it's worth recording.
Right.
There's a difference.
Yeah.
This
Yeah,
is
there was
different.
4 events. There was the darkness, the earthquake, the veil tearing, and the rising of dead people.
Yeah.
I mean, that's not an everyday
That
thing,
happened.
period. But it all happened at that time.
Yeah.
Well, they didn't know it at the time. Like the centurions didn't know about, I would think, that the veil was torn because they're physically at the site. The news doesn't travel that fast. And what was the other one? Well, the earthquake they saw.
Darkness, the
Darkness they
earthquake,
saw.
the veil, and
But the veil and the rising of the people, these guys that were physically there at the time didn't know that at the time, I would think. Right? Because that's something that you had to find out later.
you would think, yeah.
What time did that happen? It's at 3 o'clock. I know what happened at 3, that type of thing, but they didn't know. But the earthquake and the darkness, they were there.
Right.
But you're right.
So does this change your life in any way?
Better.
Yeah.
It changed the opportunity for humanity.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, I've always said it's the center point of humanity. It's the, it's the date in history that God pointed to from the foundation of the world. I mean, the scripture tells us that he set a date where his son would be sacrificed from the foundation of the world. And that is the, it's the most, along with the resurrection, the burial and the resurrection, it is the most important date and will always be the most important date in human history.
And the cool thing is, this isn't the end. But for
Absolutely.
this morning, this is the end. What are you guys praying for?